All right, gonna do a video here with some information on salary arbitration. I've got to start just to make sure everybody's on the same page. We all know what we're talking about when we say salary arbitration. Got the Out of the Park manual up here, which is a super handy resource if you don't use it. So, who is eligible for arbitration is what we're going to look at first, and this is players who have at least 3 years but fewer than 6 years of major league service time. So if we flip over to that's not the page I'm meant to be on. If we flip over to our salary page, we can see that guys become eligible for arbitration when it has this A here. So they're on these so between 3 to 6 years of major league service time. So before three, they're on the auto renewing contracts, where it says auto, and then when they go to arbitration, it's got this A in parentheses here. All right. So there are some technicalities to this, such as players who are in the top 17% of service time among players with at least 2 years of service time are also eligible for salary arbitration. So these guys are known as Super 2 status. They will reach arbitration, I believe, after 2 years of the auto renewing because they're in the top 17% of having at least 2 years of service time. They're under that 3-year requirement. So it's 3 to 6 years plus anybody with 2 years who's in the top 17% of service time players among players who have fewer than 3 years of service. I know it's a little confusing. Basically, it's just players who have between 3 to 6 years of service time. But there are some ways you can kind of manipulate this arbitration and when guys become eligible. Major league teams certainly do it. You can also get a 4th year of arbitration out of players, whereas the standard will just be three years of arbitration. So if you call a guy up who at the beginning of the season, right, a rookie, he's probably going to hit Super 2 status if he stays up that entire time, and you're going to lose his rights after 6 years, right? So he's going to have after 6 years he's going to be eligible for free agency. But if you keep a guy in the minor leagues there's not a hard and fast rule that I know of in Out of the Park. Is generally if you keep him down in the minors for about the first 3 weeks of the season or any 3 weeks during the season, you'll get an extra year of service time out of them. Let's look at like Ethan Weinberger here, right? So he is about to enter his 3rd year of the auto renewal contract, which we can see here in 27 and 28 here in the league minimum, and 29 he's going to earn the league minimum, and then he goes into arbitration the following year. And as you can see, this doesn't show arbitration because I already agreed to a contract with him. More on that in a minute. But as you can see, he's got 4 years of arbitration. So what happened here by the Mets keeping him down in the minors for the 2027 season, they kept him down for 55 games, which is way more than you need. He's now a free agent a year later. So basically, it doesn't count as a year of Major League service time unless you have, I think it's about 172 days on the Major League roster in a season. So as you can see, a Major League service this year, 187 days, that's a full year. Anything, I think it's under 172 in that first year is not going to count as a full year. So he's had 2 years of Major League service time, but he's only been on the roster for 1 year and 122 days. I know it's a little confusing. If you just want to keep it in mind, that guys are going to be eligible for arbitration for 3 years, their 4th, 5th, and 6th year, basically. That's fine to keep that simple. But if you have a prospect that you're thinking about calling up, making your team at the beginning of the year, maybe keep him in the minors for the first 3 weeks if you can, if it makes sense for your teams. You see teams do it all the time, like Chris Bryant in real life. It happened with it was a big deal when the Padres didn't do it with Fernando Tatis Jr. And he made the team right out of opening day. But it's why you see a lot of times prospects aren't up even when they're ready for the first few weeks of the season, because teams want to get that extra year of control. All right, so I'm done with the manual, so I'm going to go full screen here. And so I'm not at salary arbitration, as you can see, January 8th. So why would that be relevant when I just passed it? Well, I'm going to show you something you should think about, because the off season of the time you should be thinking about arbitration for the following season, right? So for example, you can see with Weinberger, I already agreed to a $3.9 million deal with him for next year. Now, he was not open to a multi-year contract. He was only open to 1 year, and his arbitration estimate was, I believe, 3.9 or 4 million. And I think that's going to skyrocket up. And the reason that I think that is because he's now, he had a partial year up where he was good, but then last year he put up 4.1 WAR for me. He put up a 131 OPS plus. He's now going to enter his second full season as a major leaguer. He's going to be 27. I think I'm betting that is going to pay off for me to be paying him only 3.9 next year. I think that's going to go way up as the season goes on. And, he wasn't open to signing a deal for any of these years, but I've now got him locked in at 3.9, which I think is going to be really cheap. So what I'm saying is, when you have a guy who is arbitration eligible the next season, I would look at maybe signing him for that year before that next season begins, like I did with Weinberger. I also did it here with Livian Delgado. He was set to make only $2.2 million because he's coming. You can see with his ratings, both Head Scout and OSA think this guy is a really, really good pitcher. But he's had a couple decent seasons for me, but he's coming off a really bad year where he's hurt and only put up 1.1 WAR. So his arbitration estimate is way down. So I locked him in for that 2.2, and I think that's a really good deal for me. The only time you want to be careful with it is when it's a guy's last year of arbitration. So say Luke Little, right? If he was a guy I wanted to sign a long-term deal with, I might look to sign him beyond just that year. Because the thing is, I now can't negotiate with Weinberger until next offseason. See, there's nothing here. So you're locked in for that deal. You can't negotiate with him until the next offseason once you do that. So if it's a guy on the last year of his deal, you're not going to be able to negotiate with him until he's basically about to become a free agent. And so you can see where this paid off. See, Dylan Lawson, I have him signed this year for $940,000. That's an arbitration year. And then he jumps up to 3.4 and 4.6. This is because I signed him to a 940 deal before last season, thinking that he might have a breakout season because he was going to be our number 5 starter. And he was healthy. And look, he had a couple of rough years for me where he had arm injuries. He just was not in the lineup, in the rotation consistently, and he just had some issues. But then he really started to come on in 2027 for me. My scout continued to like him, so I said, shoot, $940,000 for a guy that could be a decent starter for me. And these are some good ratings. He dominated AAA when he'd been down there. And so I signed him, and he put up 2.9 WAR as my 5th starter, and he led my team in innings pitched. So $940,000, I definitely saved some money there by signing him. Now, am I gonna do the 3.4 and the 4 or the 4.6? I actually haven't even looked to see what he's open to or wants. So he's open to 3.6. That's tempting to me. At the same time, I'm not sure how much this is going to shoot up. I mean, I guess if he has another awesome season, but this is now getting up into the territory where I'm not sure I'm going to save a ton of money. Considering he's only had one good year on the books, I'm probably going to wait this out. But I saved myself a ton of money by that. I'm hoping to do the same thing here with Delgado. I'm hoping to do the same thing here with Weinberger. And I'll look to do it with other guys like Bob Maldonado here. $6.9 million is a nice projection for first-year arbitration, but he's obviously not there yet. He's not eligible yet. But I will go through some of these guys. They're mainly just got some relief pitchers and stuff. I might just leave them alone, or I might sign them. The relievers generally stay pretty cheap, so they're not going to be my rotation. They're not going to be my closer. That's another thing, is if you have a reliever who's in his arbitration years before free agency, maybe don't give him the closer's job if you have somebody else who can take it, who's into a guaranteed contract, because racking up saves is one thing that'll drive up arbitration costs. So, I can show you, for example, I did this with Durbin Feltman. The first year he came up, I did have him in the closer role. But then I decided, well, if I want to keep this guy around long-term cheaply, then I'm going to just have him be my setup guy. And I did until I signed him to a free agent deal, and now he's my closer again. And as you can see, that kept him very cheap. I had a guy who was like an ace, a really good reliever, maybe not an ace reliever, might be a little strong, but I had him for around, $1 million, $2 million. So that can help keep your costs down. So, so just keep in mind that, again, keep prospects down in the minors for about 3 weeks during the season, so you can manipulate their service time and get an extra year out of them before they hit free agency. Negotiate one-year deals with guys who want one-year deals when they're in arbitration during the off season before that next season begins, if you think they're going to break out, if you think they're going to be good and that arbitration is going to go way up. So, and then keep young relievers out of the closer role when they're arbitration eligible. So those are just some arbitration tips. In terms of arbitration itself, honestly, I don't go to it that often. I try to sign guys before it begins, just because, one, if it's a guy that your fans like, they respond favorably to an extension, 1 year extension. They don't care about arbitration. And two, your players don't necessarily like arbitration, and it takes some of the uncertainty out of it. If it, especially if it's a better player, you might want to compromise with him. And a lot of times, players will sign for right around this estimate. Even they're going to be asking for more initially, but you can normally get them to sign for around that estimate. So that's all for my tips on arbitration. If you have any questions or anything, or hopefully I broke that down as accurately and simply as possible at the beginning stuff. I know that's a little tedious in terms of the MLB roster rules, but you can really game the system a bit. And I don't mean like game the out of the park system. I mean the major league system of service time if you're aware of those rules. So anyways, that's all for this video.